How to Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real-World Problems by Randall Munroe. Introduction. Imagine for a moment, you're an engineer at NASA. Your team has just spent years building a multi-billion-dollar, car-sized rover named Curiosity, destined for Mars. Everything is ready, but there's one final, terrifying problem you have to solve. How do you land this priceless piece of equipment gently on the surface of another planet? The old methods won't work. Parachutes and airbags that worked for smaller rovers are useless here. Curiosity is simply too big and heavy. The Martian atmosphere is too thin. Someone suggests putting rockets on the rover itself to let it hover down gently. It sounds good, but the rocket exhaust would kick up a blinding dust storm, making it impossible to see the ground and land safely. The ideas get more and more desperate, and then, someone proposes an idea so outlandish, so utterly ridiculous, that it sounds like something from a cartoon. What if, they suggest, we build a sky crane, a separate rocket-powered vehicle that hovers high above the Martian surface, and lowers the rover down to the ground on a long rope, like a spider descending on a thread? It sounds crazy. It sounds like a bad idea, but as the engineers analyze it, they realize something incredible. Every other idea is worse. So, with the eyes of the world upon them, they try the ridiculous idea. And it works perfectly. That single story, my friend, captures the entire spirit of the book we're exploring today. How to Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real-World Problems. Its author is Randall Munroe, a former NASA roboticist himself and the brilliant mind behind the beloved webcomic XKCD. This isn't just a book of fun facts or bizarre scenarios. It's a masterclass in thinking. It's a guide to looking at the simplest problems in our lives, like how to jump high, or throw a pool party, or cross a river, and asking, what if we solve this in the most complicated, inefficient, and scientifically fascinating way possible? By the end of our journey today, you will not only learn how to theoretically power your house by destroying one of Mars's moons, but you'll also gain a powerful new way to look at the world. You'll see that sometimes, by exploring the most absurd ideas, we uncover the most profound truths about science, engineering, and the beautiful, complex rules that govern our universe. So, let's begin. Book summary. At its heart, this book is built on a simple, powerful premise. We all start out not knowing how to do things. 132 We learn the right way, the normal way, and often we stop there. But Randall Munroe invites us to become explorers again, to look at a simple task and let our curiosity run wild. What happens when we apply the full force of physics and mathematics to problems that don't seem to need them? Let's start with something fundamental: moving. How do you jump really high? 73 We see basketball players leap, but even the best professional can only jump about 2 feet straight up. 165 It's a bit disappointing, isn't it? Our bodies are limited. If you want to go higher, you need to cheat. 176 Now, you could use a ladder, but that's hardly jumping. 180 A better way to cheat, as athletes have discovered, is pole vaulting. You might think the magic is in the springy pole, but it's not. The pole is just a clever tool for redirecting energy. 190 The real secret to a high vault is the athlete's running speed. 189 All that forward momentum you build up on the runway gets converted, through the pole, into upward height. In fact, you could achieve almost the same height by running up to a perfectly curved ramp on a skateboard. 192 The physics are nearly identical. But how high can you really go? Pole vaulting will get you about 6 meters up. 201 To go higher, we need to cheat even more. We need to enlist the help of the planet itself. Imagine standing on the side of a mountain. Wind comes rushing towards the mountain and, having nowhere else to go, flows upward along its face. 233 This is called an updraft. Birds use weaker versions of this, called thermals, to soar for hours without flapping their wings. 230 For a human, you'd need winds blowing upward faster than your terminal velocity. The speed you'd reach in a free fall, about 130 miles per hour. 227 That's a hurricane-force wind blowing straight up. You won't find that on most mountains. But you can change your own aerodynamics. A wingsuit can reduce your falling speed to just 30 miles per hour. 238. A paraglider can slow it down even more, enough that a strong ridge wind could actually lift you off the ground and carry you thousands of feet into the air. 243. But we're not aiming for thousands of feet. We're aiming for the record. In a few special places on Earth, like the mountains of Argentina, something incredible happens. 254. When conditions are just right, the mountain waves, the updrafts, can interact with the polar night jet stream, creating waves of rising air that reach all the way into the stratosphere. 246. In 2006, two glider pilots, Steve Fawcett and Einar Enevoldsen, rode these stratospheric waves to over 50,000 feet. 251. That's nearly twice the height of Mount Everest, higher than any commercial airliner flies. 252. They only stopped because their pressure suits inflated so much they couldn't move the controls. 253. So, to achieve the highest jump in human history, the method is clear. You construct an outfit shaped like a sailplane, seal yourself inside, jump into the air on a windy mountain ridge in Argentina, and ride the wind into the stratosphere. 254. 260. You will have jumped higher than any wing-borne aircraft. You won't get an Olympic medal, but you'll know you're the true champion. 270. This way of thinking, taking a simple goal and pushing it to its most extreme, logical conclusion, is the engine that drives the entire book. It's not just about moving your body, it's about moving your entire life. Consider the common task of moving to a new house. 1267. The normal way involves endless boxes and a moving truck. It's a lot of work. So much work, in fact, that you might be tempted to just dig a giant hole and push all your belongings into it. 1271. That's an option. But what if you refuse to pack? The alternative is simple. Move the entire house. 1299. People do this all the time, lifting a house off its foundation with I-beams and placing it on a flatbed truck. 1309 to 1310. 1312. But what kind of gas mileage would your house get on the highway? This is the kind of ridiculous question physics is forced to answer. A house is about as aerodynamic as a brick. At 55 miles per hour, you'd get about half a mile per gallon. 1323. At 80 miles per hour on the Autobahn, you'd burn a gallon of gas every 1,200 feet, and the wind would likely start tearing off important parts of your roof. 1324 to 1325. Driving is too slow anyway. Why not fly? The world's most powerful helicopters can't lift a whole house, but what if you used several at once? 1337. The U.S. military actually studied this during the Cold War, proposing a superlift vehicle made by essentially gluing two large helicopters together. 1342 to 1343. A better option is a cargo plane. AC-5 Galaxy can lift a medium-sized house, though it probably won't fit inside. 1345 to 1346. You'd have to strap it to the top, like NASA did with the space shuttle. 1351. On the plaque next to the shuttle mount on the carrier aircraft is perhaps the greatest joke in aerospace history. It reads, "Adage orbiter here. Note, black side down." 1354. But even strapping it to a plane is too conventional. Why use the whole plane? Why not just the engines? The engines on a 787 Dreamliner are powerful enough to lift a small house straight into the air. 1357. With 4 of them strapped to the sides, you could turn your home into a giant, hovering drone. You could fly for about 90 minutes before needing to refuel, making any move under 100 miles quite feasible. 1373 to 1374. This escalation of absurdity from jumping, to moving, to flying your house reveals a fundamental truth about energy and motion. But what about manipulating our environment on an even grander scale? Let's say you want to throw a pool party, but you have a small problem. You don't have a pool. 276. Don't panic. An in-ground pool is just a fancy hole, so you could start there. 280. An above-ground pool is simpler, just walls and a floor. 293. But water is heavy, and it pushes outward on the walls with a force called hoop stress. 299 to 300. If your walls aren't strong enough, they will burst. 301. So, what should you build your pool walls out of? Aluminum foil? The math says you could only fill it 5 inches deep before it bursts. 310 to 311. What about cheese? Physics doesn't care if your question is weird. It just gives you the answer. According to a 456-page handbook called Cheese Rheology and Texture, hard Gruyere cheese has a specific tensile strength. 329. Plugging that into the formula, you find you would need a 2-foot thick wall of Gruyere cheese to contain a 3-foot deep pool. 331 to 332. As the book notes, you may have trouble convincing anyone to jump in. 333. Now you need water. A garden hose is too slow. 345. What about ordering it online? You could order 20,000 gallons of Fiji water from Amazon. 353 to 354. This would cost a fortune and leave you with 150,000 bottles to open. 358. Opening them one by one is too slow. A sword? Also too slow. A shotgun? Messy. 360 to 364. What about a nuclear bomb? 368. This is a completely ridiculous suggestion, which is why, of course, the U.S. government studied it during the Cold War. 369. In 1955, they placed beer and soda at various distances from a nuclear test to see if the beverages would survive and remain drinkable. 370? 373. The conclusion? The beer mostly tasted fine and was safe to drink. 382 to 383. But nuclear weapons, it turns out, are not very good bottle openers. 385. The most efficient solution is an industrial plastic shredder, which can process 30 tons of bottles per hour, separating the liquid and filling your pool in just over 2 hours. 392 to 393. But why stop at a pool? What if you need to cross an entire river? You could try swimming, but that can be dangerous. 1043. You could try jumping it. A fast runner can jump a 7-foot gap. 1071. On a bicycle at 30 miles per hour, you could theoretically jump a 60-foot river, but you'd also land at 30 miles per hour, which is a recipe for disaster. 1077 to 1079. So maybe jumping isn't the best idea. What about changing the state of the river itself? You could freeze it. 1125. To create an ice bridge just 4 inches thick and wide enough to be stable, you would need about 330 megawatt-hours of electricity, costing around $50,000. 1159. And that's just for a temporary bridge. To freeze the entire flowing Kansas River would require 87 gigawatts of power, the same as a heavy lift rocket at takeoff. 1145. 1147. Powering the refrigeration equipment would require a river of gasoline nearly 5% the size of the river you're trying to freeze. 1149 to 1150. Freezing is impractical. So let's try the opposite, boiling it. 1162. Could you install enough tea kettles upstream to turn the entire river into steam, allowing you to walk across the dry riverbed? 1162. To boil the Kansas River, you would need 300 million electric tea kettles running at once, covering a circular area 2 miles in diameter. 1176. 1178. The power draw would be equivalent to the entire electrical grid of the United States. 1193. Plugging it in would trigger every circuit breaker in the state. 1192. But if you could power it, the result would be apocalyptic. The rising steam would form a mushroom cloud reaching the stratosphere. 1199. The heat from the kettles would be greater than a miles-wide lake of lava. 1205. In fact, as the book wisely states, anything that puts out as much energy as a lake of lava becomes a lake of lava. 1206. Your kettles would melt into a bubbling, molten mess. So if we can't go over it or through it, perhaps the best solution is the most elegant. When engineers needed to build the first suspension bridge over the Niagara Gorge, they couldn't get a boat across the turbulent water. 1227. Instead, they held a kite flying contest, offering a prize to whoever could fly a kite from one side to the other. 1229. A 15-year-old boy named Homan Walsh succeeded. and his thin kite string was used to pull a stronger rope across, then a stronger one, and eventually the first steel cable of the bridge, 1230 to 1232. This pattern of finding a simple, underlying principle and applying it in an extreme way is a recurring theme. It even applies to everyday actions like throwing a ball or playing an instrument. Take how to throw things. 1483 Munroe develops a surprisingly accurate formula for how far a person can throw an object, based on only 3 things: the thrower's power output, about 20 watts per kilogram of body weight for an athlete, the length of their throwing motion, and the object's mass. 1495, 1498. The formula correctly predicts an MLB pitcher's fastball at 94 miles per hour. 1500. But the fun begins when you plug in absurd combinations. How far could an NFL quarterback throw an 11.5-pound blender? The formula says 18 yards. 1519. How far could former President Barack Obama throw an Olympic javelin? 97 feet. 1522. This isn't just a party trick. It's a demonstration that a few core physical laws govern a huge range of complex human actions. This same spirit of expansion applies to how to play the piano. 615. A standard piano has 88 keys, covering most of the range of human hearing. 630. But why stop there? To play all the notes a young child can hear, you'd need to add 27 extra keys on the right. 651. Dogs can hear even higher frequencies, requiring another 12 to 15 keys. 666. Bats, which use ultrasound for echolocation, would need several more. 668. On the low end, elephants can hear infrasound, frequencies below 20 Hz, so you'd need another 5 keys on the left. 695. The lowest frequency sounds, called microbaroms, are generated by waves on the open ocean, the planet's own deep subwoofer. 742. 744. To play that music would require another 75 keys. 745. Your final piano would have 235 keys, capable of playing everything from Beethoven to bat hunting songs to the voice of the sea itself. 749. This relentless questioning leads to one of the most practical and yet wildly imaginative sections of the book. A Q&A with Colonel Chris Hadfield, a real-life astronaut and test pilot, on how to handle various emergency landings. 788. If you have to land a small plane in a farm field, what crop should you aim for? Hadfield's answer is immediate: a freshly planted field is best. 814. The worst is one that's just been plowed. 815. Sunflowers would be a big mistake. 811. What if you have to land on an aircraft carrier in a normal passenger plane? Get the captain to turn the ship into the wind and go as fast as possible. 837 to 838. This creates a 50 or 60 mile per hour headwind, dramatically slowing your speed relative to the deck. 838. What if you're locked out of the plane, on the exterior, but can crawl around? 922. You can't move the main control surfaces by hand, they're too stiff. 934. But, Hadfield explains, if you're clever, you can find the small trim tabs on the edge of the tail fins. 938 to 939. These are used for fine adjustments and are small enough to move by hand. By manipulating them, you could, conceivably, fly the plane down. 940. Perhaps the most absurd question posed is this: you're in the space shuttle while it's being carried on the back of its 747 carrier aircraft. The pilot of the 747 has bailed out. What do? 969 to 970. Hadfield's answer, without a moment's hesitation, is simple. Fire the separation mechanism. Pull back firmly to miss the SCA's tail, and then glide to a landing. Easy peasy. 974 to 975. The scenario seems impossible, but it's actually how the shuttle's first test flights were conducted. 973. What sounds like a desperate movie plot is, to an astronaut, just a standard procedure. The book is filled with these moments, where an absurd problem reveals a deep and often simple truth. Can you power your house on Mars? 2071. Not easily, as the wind is too thin and the sun is too far away. 2074. But Mars has a tiny moon, Phobos, that is slowly spiraling closer to the planet. 2080. In theory, you could attach a 5,800-kilometer tether to it, letting the end dangle in the Martian atmosphere. 2086. As Phobos orbits, the end of the tether would whip through the thin air at over twice the speed of sound. 2088. A turbine attached to the end could generate enough power for an entire town. 2092. The drag would slowly pull Phobos down, but in the process, you could power a Martian civilization for millennia? Right up until the moment the moon finally crashes into the planet, causing a dinosaur-level extinction event. 2102. 2125. Free energy, it turns out, often has a terrible long-term cost. 2130. Ultimately, How To is not a manual for doing things the wrong way. It's a celebration of curiosity. It's a testament to the idea that no question is too ridiculous to ask if you're willing to follow the science to its conclusion. Whether it's telling if you're a 90s kid by the radioactive isotopes in your teeth from Cold War bomb tests, 2501, 2524, or winning an election by legally changing your name to above's Nani-Oft, 2544. Munroe shows us that the world is a playground of interconnected systems, governed by elegant rules. And the more we play with those rules, the more we understand not just how the world works, but how we can think more creatively, solve problems more effectively, and never, ever lose our sense of wonder. Commentary. As we come to the end of our exploration of How To, it's worth taking a step back and asking, what is this book really about? On the surface, it's a collection of brilliantly funny, wildly impractical solutions to everyday problems. It's a book that makes you laugh out loud while accidentally teaching you about fluid dynamics or orbital mechanics. But beneath that playful surface lies a much deeper and more powerful message. This book is a love letter to the process of thinking itself. In a world that often rewards quick answers and conventional wisdom, Randall Munroe champions the slow, deliberate, and often messy process of figuring things out from first principles. The most profound lesson here is not about how to boil a river or fly your house. It's about the importance of asking what if, and why not. Think about the NASA engineers and their sky crane. The winning idea wasn't the most obvious one, it was the one that survived the most rigorous questioning, even though it sounded absurd. The book teaches us that innovation doesn't always come from a flash of genius. More often, it comes from a willingness to explore bad ideas. By figuring out why an idea is bad, why you can't run across water, why you can't power your house by freezing a river, you gain a much deeper understanding of the underlying principles. That understanding is the true prize. This is a skill that goes far beyond science and engineering. How often in our own lives do we get stuck on a problem because we limit ourselves to the sensible solutions? This book gives us permission to be playful, to be absurd, to approach our challenges with the unbridled curiosity of a child who hasn't yet been told what's impossible. So, here are a few simple ways to bring this mindset into your own life. First, the next time you face a problem, big or small, challenge yourself to come up with 3 genuinely terrible solutions, not just mediocre ones, but truly awful, impractical, or ridiculous ideas. This isn't for the sake of comedy. It's an exercise to break you out of your mental ruts. Once you've explored the absurd, the practical solutions often appear in a new light. Second, embrace the back-of-the-envelope calculation. You don't need to be a physicist to do this. When you have an idea, try to estimate the numbers involved. How much would it cost? How long would it take? How much energy would it require? Most of the time, your numbers will be rough, but the act of thinking quantitatively forces you to confront the real-world constraints of your idea and often reveals its true potential, or its fatal flaw. Finally, and most importantly, never be afraid to admit you don't know something. Randall Munroe writes that for anything everyone knows, there are over 10,000 people in the United States learning it for the first time that day. 140. Being a learner is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of a curious and open mind. The world is too vast and wonderful for any one person to know it all. The real joy is in the discovery. That was our deep dive into How To, Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real-World Problems by Randall Munroe. We've journeyed through some of its most mind-bending ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary like this is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the pictures, but it can't give you the feeling of actually being there. The real magic of this book is in the journey itself, in following Munroe's brilliant and hilarious train of thought as he unravels one puzzle after another. If any of the ideas we talked about sparked your curiosity or made you smile, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's about learning a new way to see the world, and that is an experience that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you've enjoyed this exploration and want to continue building your mental library of the world's most powerful ideas, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. It tells us we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next adventure into another book that can change your life. Let's keep learning and growing together.